Well, hello again, everyone. I'm back with another update. I am currently at the top of Peters Mountain. Hiked up here from home. And there is no trail currently on this portion of Peters Mountain. That is supposed to in the future be developed into part of the Allegheny Trail along here. So far it still hasn't. Currently, in order to follow the Allegheny Trail northbound, you have to turn off onto a road walk, which is 35 mile. But in the future, at some point, the gap is supposed to be developed into a trail so that people don't have to leave the trail for the road walk anymore. It will be a continuous trail all the way to the PA line, the Pennsylvania line, Mason-Dixon line. So this is the corridor for the trail in the future that's going to be developed. I am hiking today, part of the corridor. Approximately 10 miles south of here along the ridge is the Raptor Observatory, where the trail turns into a road walk. It can be followed further, a few miles further, and it ends at, southern portion ends at the Laurel Branch trailhead currently. So I'm basically following the ridge line and what will be the future path of the Great Eastern and Allegheny Trail both through here. And the ridge line isn't too difficult to follow for most of it. And it forms the border between West Virginia and Virginia. So what I'm going to talk about here today is, again, a continuation of my discussion on how this hurricane season is turning into a dud, as I predicted it would months ago. Because most meteorologists do not fully understand. Many believe in global warming, not all, but many do. And their predictions are based on this belief that the planet is continuously getting warmer due to man's activities, and that's going to lead to more hurricanes every year, hotter ocean temperatures. But even many meteorologists some that don't believe in global warming man-made, are still predicting a record season or very active season. And now that we're going into the middle of September with no named storms for weeks now, that many people are saying, oh, it's going to suddenly go gangbusters in another week or two. Well, the window is already closing. The westerlies in the Atlantic have already begun their seasonal shift south. The Azores Bermuda High is already starting to make a southward retreat. There's already a fall-like pattern establishing itself over the northern hemisphere in many areas. So the window for this hurricane season is rapidly closing. And for these people who are meteorologists, who should realize all these things, and don't. They're saying it's going to suddenly get active. We're not going to really see anything for at least 2 more weeks. That puts us into the autumnal equinox and the peak of the hurricane season. Can these meteorologists not admit that they were totally wrong with their forecasts? If there is nothing going on right now in the Atlantic and Pacific for that matter, it's a symptom of something much bigger going on, which I've been talking about. The oceans are tapped out of their heat. You need heat for hurricanes to develop. And without that heat, we don't know in history whether there was a hiatus in hurricanes or not. There really isn't much historical records to look back on beyond the 20th century, going back. We do know that they've done a study of sediments around the Gulf Coast, because obviously with storm surges there'd be sediments deposited well inland from these surges. Only hurricanes pretty much could cause. I mean, there could be tsunamis, but the truth of the matter is, look at all these ferns. The truth of the matter is, studies had been done, and what it showed was interesting in that back during the medieval warm period, there was evidence from 650 AD to 1250, which corresponds to the medieval warm period and the end of another chilly period. Medieval warm period comes under that period, where hurricanes were 5 times more common in the Gulf of Mexico than now, along the Gulf shore. And that substantiates that hurricanes need heat. We don't know how much warmer the climate was than now, but it was definitely warmer during the medieval warm period than current. They raised livestock on Greenland. So back then, Greenland had the climate of that Newfoundland, maybe even Nova Scotia has today. I mean, didn't stay warm long enough to melt the entire Greenland ice cap. But it likely melted back along the edges enough to where forests grew in places where there's ice now. But the ice sheet was still there, but could you imagine it getting up in the summer to the 80s in temperature? The ice sheet would still be there. It would be melting back, but there would still be there. There's such a huge volume of ice there. Maybe it retreated back into the continent slightly, and forests grew up to the edge of it. You think about it. The medieval warm period was much warmer than today. Of course, they won't admit that. Likely the Arctic ice cap possibly may have even completely disappeared for a time. The Arctic Ocean may have even been completely open back then. And just think about it. The difference in climate and weather patterns. Much more hurricanes. Now, the converse is true. Global cooling during the Maunder minimum, we really don't have a record of hurricanes back then. Or were there any during that period? As I've said before, hurricanes are Earth's way of keeping the heat balanced. Keeping the heat budget balanced for the Earth. If there's an excess of heat, you get more hurricanes. There's a lack of heat, you get less. To the point where when the heat budget is balanced completely and there's no excess heat, you don't get any hurricanes anymore. And what I've been saying lately is naturally, without interference from man, I'd say with 1 week solar cycle and a second weaker than average, which is, this one is weaker than average. I know they're trying to say there's as many sunspots as cycle 23. Yeah, the numbers have been high the last couple of months, but the cosmic ray count has not dropped below 5%, and that is the barometer. In 23, it dropped down below minus 10%. So far, it hasn't done anything close to that yet. So the activity for overall is probably comparable to 20 back in the early 70s. Maybe not even quite as strong. Even in cycle 20, it got down below 5% for about 6 months straight. So far, it hasn't even done that. So we're still between 20 and 24. And 20 was a weaker than average cycle. So we're still on our way to qualifying for a grand solar minimum unless the activity increases from what it's been. We will have 2 weaker than average solar cycles under our belt, and it would take 1 more weaker than average to declare that we're actually in a grand minimum. You need at least 3 in a row, I think. It hasn't happened since the 19th century. So again, when I started this video, the lull of hurricane activity this year is a symptom of something much larger going on, which meteorologists don't want to acknowledge because so many of them predicted a terrible season this year, active, and started with Beryl, and it looked like they were going to be right. I predicted that after Beryl, the season would go dead, and I was right. So up to this point, I've been right. And that substantiates my claim that Beryl took all the heat out of the Atlantic that was put in by those solar flares. It was just enough heat there to power 1 Cat 5 hurricane or 4, whatever it was. And that was all the heat that was in the budget. That storm used up the bank account of heat that was built up by the solar flares back in May. That's it. It's used up. Only the sun can replenish that bank account of heat. Nothing else is going to do it. We need a bunch more solar flares pretty soon if they want any more storms this year. If we don't get that, I hate to throw a wet blanket on the party of these meteorologists, but the hurricane season is probably finished. If we do not get any more major solar storms or flares in the next few weeks, the season's done. And I know there's a lot of talk of something developing in the Gulf. There's been talk for weeks now. There has been a system in the Gulf lollygagging around, but it's not developing. Not developing because the Gulf is tapped out of heat. They try to say that the water temperatures are 88 degrees. There's no way. If it was really that warm in the Gulf, that storm that has been lollygagging around there for 2 weeks now would have developed into something by now. Not developing because there's no heat there. Water temperatures are not 88 degrees there. I looked at a temperature anomaly map that a meteorologist posted this morning. The oceans are boiling according to this map. They have the North Pacific being like bath water. But yet I look at the weather records for Seattle, and every time there's a maritime influence there, they're running 7-8 degrees below normal. How is the North Pacific that warm? If it was, it would show up in the weather in the Pacific Northwest. If they had a flow off that Pacific, the temperatures would be above average, not below. If the waters were that much warmer than average across the whole North Pacific, they would not be chilly if there's a flow off the Pacific, or cooler than average by that much. The 2 mild winters that we've had in the eastern U.S., is we going to have a third one? Probably not. This next winter is going to be a lot more closer to average because the water vapor from Tonga is starting to settle out now. And that is what kept us warm the last 2 winters. So that's going to be it for this discussion. Thought I'd throw a few pointers out there on climate and that are interesting. I am always seeking to learn more. I am always seeking to reveal the truth to anybody that's willing to hear it. So again, this is what I'm on now is likely going to be the future corridor for the Allegheny Trail. It's a 311-mile trail that runs from the Mason-Dixon line, PA, West Virginia, down to just, I think it's 30 miles south of here. It meets up with the Appalachian Trail on Peters Mountain, which is the mountain I'm on currently. And I'm looking forward to the day when the trail is finally complete, because it will run right up the mountain from my house. Probably, likely where I'm walking right now. It's probably going to follow this old road up here. That's my guess. So that's going to be it. I will be back soon. Take with a grain of salt what these meteorologists are saying, that things are going to suddenly get active. They're likely not going to.